So here we have the SLS, or Space Launch System. The rocket portion of it is this center stage, and then these two solid rocket boosters. This part of the rocket is what helps Orion get to space, launching out of the Kennedy Space Center. And then as you come up, this top portion here is the Launch Abort system. And once this all launches to space, this part will break off. This is what we call the second stage. So the three bottom parts of the rocket will fall back to Earth, and then we'll have the second stage. And eventually, even in a nominal case, the Launch Abort system will jettison and go away. And we'll fly like this around the Earth about once. And then what we'll do before we re-enter coming back to Earth is we'll jettison Orion, we'll turn around, and then we'll come back in through the atmosphere just like that.
Okay, while we're waiting for the last few people to come in, I'll just start with some of the usual commercials I need to do here. I wanted to make a couple of announcements. I have some literature in the hallway, a little cart with flyers for some of our upcoming events. But also I'm putting out a slip from the Planetary Society that helped me promote this event, and also for the Glendale Planetarium. And I don't know, how many of you knew that Glendale Community College has a planetarium? Oh, that's good. Yeah, it seems to be a well-kept secret generally in town, and they have some great programs. So I invite you to take their literature and information at the back, too. I want to welcome Lockheed back to Burbank this evening. As most of you know, a Lockheed aircraft, now Lockheed Martin, was for many years an important part of the history of this city, and I'm sure there are more than a few of you in this audience tonight who were an important part of Lockheed's history. The idea of humans going to Mars and building a spacecraft like Orion is the stuff of imagination. A couple of things have caused me to reflect recently about the human imagination and how it is a curious thing. I read something that talked about how we invented the wheel in 3500 BC, but it was not until sometime after we had landed men on the moon that we thought of putting wheels on our luggage. Odd, I thought. And then not too long ago, I overheard a couple of library patrons looking at our display about humans going to Mars, and one said to her friend, "You don't think that's really going to happen, do you?" It seems that we live at a time when our imagination, always active and inventive, has been expanded and enhanced by much of our modern visual technology, powered to an exponential degree, and it has pulled along with it our expectations about the time and effort required to realize what we imagine. It's like if we can imagine it, we think it's nearly done. It will happen. It is just a matter of time as the future unfolds. Our predictions about how soon these marvelous things in the future will be realized, whether in space exploration, biotechnology, or artificial intelligence, always seem to be earlier than they actually happen. This may have engendered some skepticism about what we can do, but what I'm particularly concerned about is that it tends to diminish our appreciation for what, in fact, has been done. We think our steps were small and slower than we thought they would be, and so what we accomplished is somehow less than remarkable. I was at an event at the Griffith Observatory the other night and heard Robert Pappalardo speak. He's the project scientist for NASA's Europa Clipper. That's the spacecraft that will explore Jupiter's moon, Europa, arguably the place beyond Earth most likely to harbor life in our solar system. The Europa Clipper will launch sometime in the next decade and will take at least 3 years to reach Europa. Dr. Pappalardo has been working on this project since its early inception stages in 1998 and 1999. By the time the Europa Clipper reaches Jupiter, he will have spent most of his working life on this project. As he remarked, quote, space exploration is not for the faint-hearted. Projects like this are massive and complex, and they take time. And he also said that because of that long arc, those who go into this field, those who make these things happen, cannot be in it just for the goal. They have to find value and satisfaction in the journey. That you have to like the nature of your work, the work you do, and the people you work with. And this was echoed a few days later when I read the eloquent comments Christopher Nye made in his interview for an article with My Burbank about this event, talking about what he enjoys at his work and what motivates him. So I think this is something for all of us to keep in mind, especially perhaps those who are thinking about careers in space exploration and the sciences. I want you to realize how difficult it is to do these things, how remarkable the things are that we can and will accomplish, and how rewarding the journey can be. In answer to that patron's question, yes, it's going to happen. I want to extend an invitation right now to tonight's guest, Christopher, and to all of you to come back here sometime in the 2030s to the Burbank Public Library and hear and explain how it was done. Christopher Nye is a systems and an integration engineer working on the environmental control and life support system for the Orion multi-purpose crew vehicle at Lockheed Martin Space. His career has given him the opportunity to work on GPS satellites, small sats, in government affairs and in business development, as well as NASA's human spaceflight program, Orion. Chris graduated from the University of Colorado Boulder with a master's degree in aerospace engineering and a focus in bioastronautics. He has been named one of Aviation Week's 2020s as a rising star in aerospace and defense, and has received the President's Volunteer Service Award multiple times for his work in STEM outreach. Please join me in welcoming Christopher Nye to the Burbank Public Library.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, everybody. I'm really excited to be here. I really love space, and so it's really fun to talk about it and share it with folks. So as Hubert said, I've been working for Lockheed for a few years now. I started my professional career in a research lab, doing some research on organisms. We sent anything from cells to worms to mice and spiders to the space station, and we experimented on them to test cancer drugs, to test aging, things like that in the International Space Station. And so that's where I started my career. And I moved over to Lockheed Martin and started working on GPS satellites. So if any of you have ever used GPS, which I think is everybody in the room, those satellites, there's a system of satellites that the Air Force sponsors for everyone in the world to use. It's a really great system. Both Boeing and Lockheed have worked on the satellites there, and Lockheed's kind of taken the turn to build the next wave of the satellites. About a year and a half ago, I switched over to the Orion program, which I'll be talking to you about tonight. But I always like trying to start with a little bit of trivia. So can anybody tell me how many people are in space right now? 6?
At least 5 or 10.
There are 6. I heard it over here, so can you pass that back for me? I got some NASA stickers to hand out if you get the question right. Try to give it to the first person that I hear. Okay, so here's an interesting fact. I know there's a lot of politics going on right now, and sometimes you don't necessarily want to be in a political discussion with somebody. So when you're talking about the midterms with your friends or family this year, I'll give you a good out if you want to get out of the conversation. This midterm election will be the first time that somebody can vote who has lived on the planet Earth with at least one person being in space for their entire life. So since October of what year does it make it that we have always had a human in space?
64?
Continuously. So 2000, right back here. Do you mind passing that back for me? Yeah, so since October of 2000, there's always been at least one person, on average more than that, living in space. So anybody who's under the age of 18 has never lived on the planet Earth with everybody else.
U.S. or any nation?
I don't know if there's always been a U.S. I think there has, because it's a space station program. So there's always been at least one U.S. and then likely one Russian. And the space station started with a crew of 3, and now they run a crew of 6 on average. But when shuttle was flying, they went up to, I think they had 11 at one time.
So there's a gap between Skylab and
Yes.
Space Station?
Yep. Yeah, that's right.
I have a question. How many people will be in Orion?
4. It's a good question. So we'll go into a little bit. The first flight will have nobody. Make sure all the systems work before we send humans up. And then when they start flying it, each mission will have 4 astronauts. All right, so next one. We'll take it back in time a little bit. How many people have walked on the moon?
12.
Nice. Good one. I swear I didn't tell him that was coming. And who was the last person to walk on the moon?
Gene Cernan.
Yeah, her back there. Nice. So that's a setup for the first video that we have for the presentation. I'll be talking about the Orion program, and we have a short video just to give an overview in the beginning.
Kennedy said, quote, the other things, go to the moon and the other things. And we are finally at a point through the evolution of the Orion spacecraft and the SLS that we're taking that next giant leap for all mankind that Neil was talking about.
The one thing I've always thought of with Mars is when they describe it as the planet that's most similar to Earth, which of course makes you think, well, it sounds like that's the first one we should visit.
It's essential that we go and find out what is out there.
There is a rocket out there. It's all over the country, and the pieces are going to come together soon from New Orleans and from the West Coast and from the East Coast. And all of those pieces are going to be assembled there at the Cape, and we're going to launch.
It's incredible the number of pieces and people that touch a spacecraft before it goes in orbit. It really is America's space program because so many people touch every vehicle.
One day, we'll be able to look up into the night sky and know that humans are living on another planet. But getting there won't be easy. In almost every state in our nation, thousands of men and women are hard at work creating the world's largest rocket. The world's first crewed deep space spacecraft and the only and most advanced infrastructure capable of launching humans into deep space.
The thing that I found out about the space program is the incredible pride that all the people making parts for it have.
It's important to get around to all of these vendors to see the pieces and the people that make those pieces.
As the mayor of the city of Cerritos, I see firsthand what these programs will do for a city.
A lot of these places that build things, they're like the cornerstone of their community. They're one of the big businesses in their community, and they're keeping those small communities thriving. Think about taking humans off of our planet and putting them on another planet, Mars, for the first time. It's just incredibly exciting to me.
It's happening now. We have begun the journey to Mars.
Am I going to be maybe turn me down a little bit now? Or am I okay back? Okay, awesome. I will fill in all of the gaps that you missed in the video, I promise. That way you don't hear it twice. So you saw images cut and sliced all over that about the Orion spacecraft, the SLS, the Space Launch System, which is the rocket. So I'll give you a little bit more background about what those pieces of the vehicle and the spacecraft are. So on this slide, you see from left to right the service module, what we call the service module, which is really the guts of the spacecraft. It holds all of the plumbing, all of the propulsion, so it's like our big gas tank. It also holds what we refer to as consumables. So it has the oxygen, the reserve oxygen supply, as well as a lot of the water that the crew will use throughout their spaceflight. To the right is the crew module. This is the piece that I work on. So this is where the crew lives, works, and sleeps. And this is the only part of the entire stack, rocket and all, that comes back to space. And that all has to do with the physics that goes into it. Basically, the more mass that you carry around with you, the more fuel you have to have. And that basically equates to having a bigger rocket to begin with. So you start hitting bounds of what you can actually design engineering-wise, depending on what the mass of your smallest piece is. Inside the crew module is everything that the crew needs to live. And Hubert was saying that I work on the life support system. So all of the pipes, the valves, the air, the oxygen, the food is all in this crew module, so that the crew can not just survive, but perform science and talk to the ground, say what's going on, as well as control the vehicle during the flight. And then the crew module then is kind of like the brains. And to the right of that is the launch abort system, which is our ejector seat for the mission. So you saw in the Apollo days, they had a similar rocket on top of the crew capsule. This is, if anything goes wrong during launch, in just a few milliseconds, this will ignite and carry the crew away to safety. So this entire rocket could explode, but the crew will be safe because they'll jettison off with this ejector seat, essentially. And to give you kind of a scale of what a handful of milliseconds are, it's about 300 to 400 milliseconds to blink your eye. So before you even know it, the crew is gone far enough from the rocket to be into safety. And we'll go back to this piece of the spacecraft a little bit later. We have a big test coming up next year that I'll talk about. And then I will mention as well that the service module is being built by ESA, or the European Space Agency. So that's a partnership that we have. This is an international program. And then the right part is sponsored by NASA and then built by Lockheed Martin. And then here's an image. We have a great model up front as well to show the Space Launch System. This is, it'll be one of the largest rockets ever built once it's up and built. Boeing's building this piece of the system, and they're in the middle of a lot of testing as well. So to give you a little bit of background, you saw people from all over the nation talking in the video about designing the spacecraft. The Orion program spans all 50 states. In this image, Wyoming doesn't have anything, but since there's been participation from companies in Wyoming to the program. So over the course of the program, since 2008, every state in the US has participated in some way to help design or build or test this program. The 3 yellow dots there are the major facilities, Denver being where Lockheed Martin is based and designing and testing the spacecraft. Houston, where NASA Johnson Space Center is, who leads the project. And then in Florida, the launch site with NASA Kennedy Space Center. And I did look it up. We have like a supplier database. There's almost 700 suppliers in the state of California, and there's 3 in Burbank. So right in your backyard, there are folks building this system. On the European side, for that service module, the guts of the spacecraft, it's very analogous what we're doing here in the United States. A great majority of the European countries have participation in the service module. And what I really like about this part about Orion is Apollo was really United States versus the Russians. But now we have a more global collaboration for spaceflight. And one of the things that you'll hear astronauts talk a lot about when they come back from a mission is that you can't see borders from space. So space is really a unique field that I think you can bring people together and realize that we all really are living on the same Earth. And actually the conservative movement came out of the Apollo era, where the Apollo astronauts took a photo of Earth that's got so famous that the photo has a name. It's called Blue Marble, and it's where you can just see Earth by itself floating in space. So some people will refer to Earth as Spaceship Earth. So we're all in space, we're just on Earth. So what good is a spacecraft if you have nowhere to go? Orion, the whole goal, the overarching goal of the Orion program is to take humans to explore the solar system and to explore Mars. This is called the Journey to Mars, and I don't think you'll find very many people in the space sector that would disagree that Mars is the ultimate goal of human exploration. We've been, JPL has been exploring Mars with robotics spacecraft for almost 60 years, but eventually we'll want to send humans. What you will find a little bit of disagreement about is what path should we take to get there. NASA's path that's been laid out is to send humans back to the moon first, and not just in an Apollo fashion where we go for a week at a time and accomplish something and come back, but this is a path where we're building up infrastructure where we can have a permanent base on the moon for research or other purposes. There's a lot of unique science that you can do from the lunar surface that you can't do on the Earth due to the atmosphere that we have here. So the first step in going back to the moon is something called the Deep Space Gateway. This is a space station, not as large as the International Space Station. International Space Station is larger than a football field with its solar arrays and all, and can house a crew of 6 to 11 people. This will be a more bare-bones space station with just the Orion spacecraft as the brains, transporting crew from Earth to space to an orbit around the moon. A habitat module where up to 4 crew can sleep and work and eat and play. And then what you see here on the left of the screen is the power and propulsion module. So this is where the batteries are and where the solar arrays will be, as well as the propulsion. So steering the spacecraft around the moon. The Deep Space Gateway is, right now it's still being designed, but in 3 years, the first module of it will be flown to space. And we'll see on this next chart, this is a layout of the Orion program. So on the far left, we had PA1, which is Pad Abort Test 1. This is that jetpack that I was talking about earlier. We wanted to make sure that from standstill on the ground, do the rockets work, and does it steer itself? And then in December of 2014, we flew a mission called EFT-1, Exploration Flight Test 1, where we sent the Orion capsule around the Earth once, and then had it come back down and splash down in the Pacific. This was mainly to test our what we call our entry, descent, and landing system. So one of the really hard problems when you go to space is getting there, obviously, with the rocket, but not a lot of satellites, if any, come back in a controlled fashion. So there's a lot of design and engineering that goes into building a system that can maintain the heat of coming back through the atmosphere, because of the friction of the air basically burns off part of the spacecraft as you enter. And this test was to make sure that those systems were designed correctly, because there's only about 6 inches between where the humans will be and 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit of burning metal, basically. So that was a successful test in 2014. And then next year is a big year for us, because we have 2 really large events. The first one is AA2, so similar to Pad Abort 1, this one is Ascent Abort 1, and this is where the jetpack that I was talking about, the launch abort system, will not only fire, but it'll be on a rocket that takes off and fire as the rocket's going. So this is to test if you're on a rocket, if there's crew inside that can safely get away from the rocket, even flying at a high speed, hundreds of miles an hour, to get away. And we have a video of that coming up next. And then late next year, late 2019, we'll have what we call EM1, Exploration Mission 1. And you'll see that nomenclature keep going after that. EM1, EM2, EM3, and on and on. And this is where we start sending Orion to the moon. We put, on EM2, we'll put crew and send humans to the moon. And that flight path actually will be the furthest humans have ever been from Earth. It'll go further than the Apollo missions did. It won't land on the moon, but it'll fly by the moon. And then 2023 is EM3, and that's where we start to build up this Deep Space Gateway that I was talking about. From there, we build up the Deep Space Gateway until it can house a crew. And past that, there are future Orion missions planned. It goes up to EM10 right now, but there's still some discussion about do we keep humans orbiting the moon, or do we build a lander to go to the surface of the moon, and who builds the lander, and then when do we make the decision to take the Deep Space Gateway or take a station like it, a habitat like it, to Mars. So here's this Ascent Abort 2. It's a really cool system. The sound on this video doesn't matter too much. If you really want it, I can make some rocket sounds. But this will be next year. So it starts steady. So yeah, that's going to be a really, really exciting test. Lost smoke and fire. If all goes correctly for the actual exploration missions with crew, this will never get used. But in the case of anything actually happening, we want to know it works. So this is going to be a really fun test. And in this video, you saw that there's no parachutes on this test because there's no crew in it. So we're just making sure that the actual launch abort system works. But does anyone know what happened today relative to parachutes? All right, so today we tested our parachute system. Actually, it was the last qualification test. So the parachutes that will deploy when there's for EM1 and when there's crew aboard. There was a test today where they dropped it out of a plane and deployed all the chutes, and it slows it down from 400 miles an hour to 0, or nearly 0, like a couple miles an hour before it splashes down in the Pacific. So that was a big milestone, just happened today. And then this is a graphic of the orbit of Exploration Mission 1. I think orbits are really cool. This was like my favorite thing that I did in school because you get all this like icky air stuff out of the way and things behave pretty nicely when you're in space. What you see here in this video will be the rocket launching off the coast of Florida. We do one orbit around Earth. That's where we do the functional checkouts of the system, make sure everything's working. If it is, we fire the propulsion system that sends us to the moon. We'll orbit the moon twice on Exploration Mission 1. It's a 40-day mission, so all of this is 40 days. And then we'll come back and we'll land in the Pacific. Again, no humans aboard on this one, but it'll be a full checkout of the system so that when we do have humans, we know it'll work. And then for Exploration Mission 2, this is the one that we're all excited for. This is one that I work on a lot for the life support system because it's the first time that we'll have humans aboard. Same setup. We'll have the space launch system for the rocket. We'll have 4 crew aboard. And this one's slated for summer of 2022. This mission will be shorter than EM1, probably about 10 days. But we'll do a flyby around the opposite side of the moon and then come back home to Earth. And yeah, so I'm happy to answer any questions that y'all might have. Anything that you'd like to know about Orion or human spaceflight, I can try to answer. Yeah. Can I? Yeah.
I know this person named Mr. Bennington.
Okay.
He works at Lockheed Martin. Do you happen to know?
I do not know him. You never know, though. The aerospace industry is incredibly small.
And also, about your plan to fly to Mars, why don't you just land, already put a space station on the moon, and then move, and then send another rocket back to Mars? So that means they have more fuel.
Yeah, so that's a great question. Fuel is really hard because usually you use all your fuel to get where you want to go. For these missions to the moon, we use up almost all of our fuel before we ever get to the moon. And the way that we get back is we slingshot around the moon. We basically use the moon's gravity, just like there's gravity here on Earth, the moon has gravity. And we line ourselves up in a way where the moon pulls us back without any propulsion. So to land on the moon and then go to Mars, or the other way around, you'd have to find a way to either have propulsion waiting for you there, like you sent it before, or to make it on the planet, which is possible, but we haven't figured out a great way to do it yet. Yeah.
So
the things that come back, are they reusable at all?
Yeah, so the Orion spacecraft, there are parts, there's a large part of it that's reusable. We use a lot of the avionics, which are the computers, because those are the really expensive parts. The system that basically keeps the astronauts safe from the heat coming back is a system that basically gets burnt up on your reentry. It's kind of like how cars today crumple, and it kind of stinks because your car gets trashed when you're in a wreck. But the car is what absorbs all the energy of the crash, and it keeps you safe. So in a similar fashion, a lot of the material burns up, and we can't reuse the heat shield. But it's a really clever engineering way of burning off energy.
So it's different than the shuttle tiles?
Yeah, so the shuttle tiles, it's a similar material. It's a material called Avcoat. For the shuttle, it was kind of like a foam material. For Orion, it's more built into the structure, into pockets, but it's still tiles. The difference with the shuttle was that it was mounted on the side. That was the big thing with Challenger, was because it was mounted on the side of the rocket, pieces of the external tank, the part of the rocket that jettisoned, the foam on that would break off and chip away at the tile. And so it would damage the tile before the crew ever came back to Earth, whereas Orion is on top, so we don't have to worry about that. So it's a little bit different of a design, but very similar, yeah. Yeah.
A couple of questions. From the graph and videos, I really couldn't tell what the size comparison is between the Orion and the Apollo. Yeah. And also where the service in the Orion, where the service module connects to the crew module. Mm-hmm. What is that purpose of that big belt around that wide part that?
Yeah, let's see if I can pull that up. So for size comparison, Orion is a little bit larger than Apollo. That's mainly because it's more capable. So Apollo was pretty bare bones. Yeah. So this is a little bit scaled up version. It's similar, what we call an outer mold line. So the silhouette of it is very, very similar because we didn't want to have to redo engineering that's already been done to make the shape, because that affects the reentry pattern and how the heat comes off. But this takes 4 instead of 3, so it's larger for that reason. And then it can also stay in space a lot longer. With just 4 crew, we can stay in space for 40 days, which is much longer than any Apollo mission. And then without crew, we can stay in space for a lot longer than that, on the order of like a couple hundred days. So pretty robust, yeah. And then the second question was?
Where the service module,
yeah.
The crew module, that belt around it. Yeah,
the belt around it is really just a mounting interface to the launch abort system. It's to make a single line between the shell that you see on the right and on the service module on the left. And then what you can't see in this image, but you can see on the model, is right here the SLS actually has something right here. And the reason for the gap is because this is where the solar arrays are folded. Yeah, and then this is a cool piece right here, is that's the umbilical connection. So that's what connects all the wiring and power between the crew module and the service module. And then it detaches, and we throw away the service module, burns up in the atmosphere, and then the crew module turns around and comes in.
Thank you.
Yeah.
When a trial fails, how long will it delay the other trials?
That's a great question. Depends on how it fails. If it fails, we build the system so that it can fail in a lot of different ways, but still have mission success. If there's a catastrophic failure, it would probably delay on the order of a year or a couple years, depending on how serious it was. Aerospace industry has a pretty robust process of investigations. So If something fails and we can't figure out why, then it'll delay the program a lot. But if we know why and do something to correct it, then it could be very quick.
So with the development, with the potential development of like the gateway system, and then I know you alluded to it before, like the whole kind of just station on the moon, pretty much. What will happen to the International Space Station? Will that become just like it's there, or like would it still be used, or like what do you think will happen?
Yeah, it's a really, really good question. We spent 15 years building the space station, and then now it's fully operational. So there's no more building going on for the space station, but we're using the crew that's on there to perform science and research. And right now it's NASA. It's a partnership. It's complex because it's a partnership between the Russians, the Europeans, the Japanese, so if one person doesn't want to fund it on their side, that could lead to it being retired. Right now, every partner of the 17 have agreed to fund it through 2024. So that's 6 years away. I've seen reports that it's stable enough, the structure of it, to go to 2028. But it's a programmatic decision and a political decision whether or not to extend the life of it. There's a lot of discussion about that right now, about what to do, and no decision has been made really past 2024.
Yeah, I was just wondering, with people going to Mars would take quite a bit of time. And they have to be in good health. What would happen if there was an emergency, like somebody had appendicitis or something in the flight? Do they make sure their appendix are removed before they go, or what happens?
Yeah, so if you're on the way to the moon, or on the way to Mars, it's 6 to 9 months to get there, 6 to 9 months back. Even if you just do a flyby. And once you go, you're set. I mean, you can't just turn around and come back because of the physics. It's just not possible. So once you do your burn to go to Mars, you're signed up for at least a year. And the crew actually trains for scenarios, like for medical emergency scenarios. And there is there's surgical equipment that they bring along, and they train the crew to do to a certain level of medical procedures. They always try to have somebody who has medical background as an astronaut. It's a really great way to become an astronaut if you're a medical doctor. But yeah, they for appendicitis, I think they would probably try and remove it on board.
What type of insulator material is used in the crew module?
So for the crew module, you're talking about like all around, or for the heat shield on the bottom? The heat shield, it's a material called Avcoat. It's kind of like it's what they call an ablative material. So it's like a foam that's a mixture of special materials that is kind of like a ceramic, where it can get really hot on one side, but the heat doesn't transfer through. So you can basically, it's like a 4-inch block. You can have like a blowtorch on this side and hold this side, and it won't get hot.
I'm assuming you either saw the movie or read the book, The Martian?
Yeah.
Was the science good, or did we get some false impressions from that?
Yeah, actually, The Martian's pretty good. Andy Weir, he's a pretty good writer. He does a lot of research. And for the most part, that was really well received versus a movie like Gravity. But the biggest thing that people point out in that movie is right in the beginning when they're trying to evacuate, their escape pod is like tipping, and it looks like the wind has a lot of force behind it. But the atmosphere of Mars is about 1% of the atmospheric pressure of Earth. So for the wind on Mars to push something over like that, it'd have to be going like thousands of miles an hour, which it doesn't on Mars. because it's so much less mass of air or carbon dioxide in the case of Mars. So that's the biggest gripe that I've seen. That we wouldn't really actually like tip over like that, but the dust storms do happen like that. There are dust storms.
What kind of fuel is being used? Solid?
There are a couple different types of fuel on the Orion spacecraft. That's a good question. SLS is liquid hydrogen, liquid oxygen on the orange tank, and then the two solid rocket boosters on the side, the two white things on the side, are a solid rocket. They're very close to what was used on the shuttle. They're same technology, same company making them, but they're a little bit taller. There's another section added. And then the actual Orion spacecraft, to steer it around and control its re-entry, uses a fuel called hydrazine, which is a mix of carbon material. It's a liquid fuel, and it's very toxic. So when the crew comes back, they actually have to like clean the vehicle before they pull the crew out.
When they finally found, when they finally went back to the back of the moon, did they find any unexpected surprises?
So we haven't gone back yet. It'll be in 2019, is in a little over a year. We'll send an uncrewed version, and we'll have cameras everywhere. So we'll see some parts of the moon that we haven't seen for a while. But we're not doing a whole bunch of lunar science on that mission. Although there are some satellites that we'll take and that'll orbit the moon on that mission. For EM2 in 2022, in 3 years, what we're hoping to find out is more of how the humans can live in deep space versus lunar science. The lunar science will really start to kick off in earnest once we start landing people back on the moon.
What exactly do you personally do? Do you either design, do you build it, I guess?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I was just talking to one of my buddies who's yesterday about this. She's like, yeah, I don't like really know what you do. Like, I know you work on it, I know what it is, but yeah, there's so many things that go on, and there's from the beginning to the end, there's so many different kinds of jobs that you can have. There's a wide range of things that everybody does. I work on a team. So I said I work on the life support system team. So I work on a team that writes the software for it. So there's dozens of valves that go on and off to control where the water goes, where the air goes, and how fast to turn the fans on. And like today, I was in a couple meetings. We're designing the displays that the crew will look at. And if the crew wants to like change the temperature, like we have like a really fancy air conditioning unit, and if they want to change the temperature, then what I do is I make sure that when the crew says change it from 80 degrees Fahrenheit to 75 degrees Fahrenheit, we have the software to make sure that that happens.
After this mission, are you going to proceed other missions with Orion?
Yeah. So I'm really focused on EM2, Exploration Mission 2. But after that, we'll be in what's called production. So Exploration Mission 1 and Exploration Mission 2 are the research and development part of the program. Like, does it work? Does it work how we expected it to work? And then after that, we'll be producing them like cars off of an assembly line. It's a limited edition. Yeah.
For the deep space missions, has there been any provision made in your life support system to protect the crew from solar radiation, like a solar flare?
Yeah, the radiation is a big focus for life support systems. So right now, what we do is we design the spacecraft to have thick enough material around the crew, the aluminum shell, so that they're safe for a nominal mission of 40 days, of up to 40 days, so that they can survive that and still maintain what's called an acceptable level of radiation. In the scenario of a solar flare where a lot of radiation comes out of the sun, the plan right now is water is actually one of the best barriers between radiation and human cell biology. So the plan right now is really crude and is to basically hide within all of the water that's on the spacecraft, and there's like a special part of the spacecraft that we've designated to have for that. But we're still waiting, like for Mars missions, that's what you'll hear as one of the hesitancies to go right to Mars is if an event like that happened, people could die from the radiation, and there wouldn't be any way to get them back in time to the proper medical procedures. Yeah.
Being that there's the mission is that long, what are the solutions for the waste?
Yeah. The not as talked about part of life support system is the waste system. So on space station, they reclaim above 90% of the wastewater, so of the urine that the crew does, and they turn it back into either drinking water or water that they can use to bathe with, or water that goes into other systems. For Orion, we have some systems that, since we are so limited in space, a lot of the waste we just throw away. So it's kind of a luxury to be able to do that. Yeah.
Have there been any reports, any data that's been received, any experience by the astronauts themselves about extra life forms that weren't anticipated?
No, but the closest thing that I've seen is there's these, I forget the name of them now, but these tiny little, I think bear is in the name. Yeah, tardigrades. Yeah, tardigrades. That are these like really resilient small organisms that they found living in space for a long time, and then I guess went dormant, and then were still alive when they came back.
Okay, so if you were to have like a station of some sort on the moon, what would you use to power it? Would you use like solar electricity or anything else?
What would I use, or what will the people?
NASA?
No, that's a really good question. So how to get power? The solar arrays would be one option. The drawback, obviously, of solar arrays is that when it's night, which is every 12 hours on the moon, you're not going to get any power. And you have to take up a lot of space. But the kind of nice thing about on the moon is you can have flexible solar arrays and like roll them out, kind of like a yoga pad or something. If it were up to me, then I would try to get a nuclear generator, kind of like what Mars Curiosity has. And that's because it's always on and it'll last for a really long time. The reason those aren't as attractive is because to get it there, you have to launch it on this giant stick of dynamite. And so if it blows up, then it's really bad for a big area of people, which is why you don't see a lot more of those launches.
So I'm mainly interested in like the art animation side.
Yeah.
But I was wondering, like, is there a way I can get into this field, or what more I can study?
Yeah.
To try and get
so there's every type of job in this arena. You see, the graphics are really important, and there's not a lot of engineers that can do good graphics. I'll tell you that. Me being one of them. I mean, there's it's companies, right? So there's everyone from finance to managers to people who hire people, recruiters, people who go out and do this type of thing for their full-time job to be, if you're a really good communicator. So if you want to be on the technical side of it, it's all about math and science. It's taking all the math that you can and learning physics really well, because everything's kind of based in physics in the aerospace realm. And then if you want to be on the business side of it, just do really well in school, or what is really attractive for hiring, for what we look at Lockheed Martin for hires is if you work really well on a team, because everything that we do at Lockheed in engineering is a team effort. Like, you saw there's over 4,000 people working on Orion, so nobody's working alone. And then experience with, like on the technical side, hardware. So like you did a project, you built something, you know what happens when you fail and how to come back from that and how to learn from that. But it's the same thing on the business side. Like if you go out and start a company, or like a small business, or you go out and you do a project that's in your field and you learn from that, that's really attractive.
Yes, our first space station, Skylab, re-entered by error because nobody had calculated how much the atmosphere expanded, plus the solar wind knocked it down. So the International Space Station is guaranteed to re-enter in the next dozens or hundreds of years. Is there going to be any provision to raise it to a higher altitude? And one other question, I worked on rocket engines at Rocketdyne for the Apollo, and there was something called NERVA, the nuclear rocket, which has a much higher ISP than hydrogen, oxygen. Are we going to get to be, to reduce our level of paranoia where we can have nuclear rockets in space?
Yeah, good questions. So first question, International Space Station re-entering. They do an orbit raise maneuver with the Progress, the Russian spacecraft, about 4 times a year. And they keep it between a range, something like 150 miles to 200 miles altitude above Earth, which they do see drag from the atmosphere. The atmosphere is still out there, albeit very, very small, but enough to bring down the orbit of the space station, the altitude of it. So they have to do those maneuvers, and they do. So they plan to continue to do those until they decide to retire the space station, which is when they'll let it by itself come back through the atmosphere and break apart and burn up. Second question, NERVA, the nuclear, I don't remember what the acronym is, but I know the N is nuclear. And I don't really see the political stance of launching radioactive material on rockets changing anytime soon. But that being said, I do know that NASA Glenn Research Center is doing some research into it. So it was pretty much dormant for a long time, but recently in the past couple of years, they've been doing a little bit more research on it.
My question is, could you clarify, is that Orion spacecraft like that you have on the diagram there, what would actually be going to Mars at that point? And then my second part of that is, I'm trying to think, what was it? Mm-hmm. Oh, so does NASA possess the technology to actually get the craft all the way to Mars already, or is that something that you're still developing? Maybe you talked about that already, I missed it. But.
No, those are good questions. So can Orion go to Mars? Not by itself. So Orion is designed to be the nerve center of whatever does go to Mars. Because we can only store so many consumables like water and food and waste. in such a small volume. So the idea is that Orion will dock with a larger or a small space station. And I think I've heard the term deep space transport thrown around for that. And then that can be larger volume, storage for all your consumables, but the capability within Orion, as far as the computers and control, is there and is being built into the design. Can we go to Mars today? The answer is yes. With the technology that we have today, we could go to Mars, but it's a question of how much risk you're willing to assume, how much risk you're willing to take. We were talking about radiation earlier. I would say that most folks in the field of space biology, which is a thing, say that if we were to send humans to Mars today and it was 6 to 9 months each way, they would very likely come back with cancer or have a really, really high risk of cancer because the radiation basically just damages all your cells, and that's what happens when cancer comes, which is really sad. But one of the cool things I think that I'm hoping that if somebody finds a way to stop the damage of cells to kind of not cure cancer, but slow cancer in some way, that'll help spaceflight, or the other way around. So that's like, I hope something that would help us go to Mars.
What's the approximate diameter and height of the Orion spacecraft?
I do not know the answer to that. The SLS stack is like 280 feet, and then I think the diameter is something around 13 feet on the order of that. I don't know the exact dimensions though. That's a good question.
So based on how similar this looks to the Apollo mission design, are there any plans to add a kind of lunar excursion module to the crew module?
That's good.
Also, so I know the SLS system only has like about half the payload capacity of the Saturn V, like around less than 70. So would you have? I know they're planning upgrades for it. So would those be able to handle like the increased payload requirements, and like what is it sitting at right now, like the total payload mass of the Orion spacecraft?
Don't quote me on these numbers because I may be a little bit off, but first, SLS only has the capacity to send an uncrewed version of Orion, and then they do an upgrade for EM2. That's mostly in the second stage, so the upper stage of it. They're trying to upgrade that so it has the capability to send humans and the increased mass of Orion with crew to the moon. And I believe it's something like 70 metric tons for SLS Block 1, and then maybe you can correct me. It's like 110 or 130 for the upgraded. The weight of the Orion spacecraft is something like 13,000 pounds. I'm pretty sure, but I could be wrong on that one.
Okay, we're gonna finish up with this last one because the questions are getting harder.
Yeah.
Where are you gonna land Orion?
Good question. That's a good one to end on. So after every mission, we'll come home and come through the atmosphere, and we will land in the Pacific Ocean, actually really close to Los Angeles, off the coast of San Diego. About 100 miles off the coast, 120 miles. And not for any particular reason of like that part of the ocean, but because it's very close to San Diego, and we partner with the Navy to go recover the capsule. Yeah.
Also, I heard that you guys, the astronauts also train if they accidentally crash in an island or whatever.
Oh yeah. So for the International Space Station, they do all these like training where if their landing goes off course, what happens? What's really interesting is right now the U.S. has no capability to send humans or bring humans back from space because shuttle retired like 6 years ago now. So we use the Russians to go up and come down with even US astronauts. And they land in the middle of Kazakhstan, which is kind of like the tundra. And so they train, if they land and they went off the grid for some reason, we can't find them, they have to be able to train to know how to like respond to a bear coming and attacking them, and like how to survive by themselves for days with like until people find them. So yeah.
Okay, let's hope it's not Kazakhstan. Thank you all for coming this evening, and I wanted to thank especially Chris. Chris, you did a fantastic job. Thank you very much, and really cool graphics and videos. Thank you. Thank you all for coming. I wanted to give a thanks to My Burbank and the Burbank Leader for helping us to get the word out on the event. And we hope to do more things like this in the future. And I hope you enjoyed it this evening. Thanks.